Hollow Creek County cooperative transaction records show one grain delivery contract that was formally voided and then formally reinstated on the same calendar day, a clerical irregularity nobody in that office remembers seeing before or since. The name on that contract was Daniel Holt. The man who voided it, and then reversed himself 11 weeks later, was a buyer named Roland Pierce, who has since told more than one person in the county that it was the worst and best professional judgment he ever made in the same season. The field that caused it all did not look like much. That was the entire problem. 2 years before that contract nearly died, a spring flood took 4 inches of topsoil off the lowest 40 acres of the Holt place, a stretch of ground along Miller's Creek that had grown corn or soybeans every single year since Daniel's grandfather cleared it in 1958. Daniel stood at the edge of that field with his wife Claire, watching brown water carry away 60 years of accumulated soil in a single afternoon, and he has said since that it was the first time farming ever frightened him. Every neighbor who farmed alongside Daniel gave him the same advice that summer. Replant it the way it had always been planted. Corn wants what corn wants, and the market pays for corn, not for patience. Daniel's own father, Russell, retired but never quiet about it, told him the same thing over Sunday dinner, more than once, in front of Daniel's 14-year-old son, Wyatt, who watched his father absorb the criticism without answering it. Daniel did not replant corn. He drove to Voss Feed and Seed and asked Old Man Voss for something the store did not usually carry in that volume, a cover crop blend of cereal rye, crimson clover, radish, and sun hemp, meant to be planted not for harvest, but to rebuild what the flood had taken. Voss special ordered it without much comment, the way he had special ordered strange things for strange Hollow Creek requests for 40 years, and told Daniel only that he hoped the man knew what he was doing. Daniel was not entirely sure he did. He planted it anyway. Daniel farmed under a forward delivery contract with the regional co-op, brokered through a buyer named Roland Pierce, a man who had built his reputation on reading a field almost the way other men read a balance sheet. Pierce's contracts were not unusual. What was unusual, and what Daniel had agreed to without fully weighing it, was a clause allowing Pierce to conduct a pre-harvest field inspection and adjust delivery terms if the crop appeared, in his professional judgment, unlikely to meet contracted volume. For 2 seasons, that clause never mattered. The 40 acres along Miller's Creek grew nothing worth harvesting, by design cycling cover crop after cover crop, while the rest of the farm carried the contract. Pierce never asked about it. A resting field is not unusual in Hollow Creek County, and Daniel let people assume what they wanted to assume. The 3rd season was different. Daniel planted that same 40 acres, finally, into corn, trusting that 2 years of root systems and clover and radish tunnels had done what he'd gambled they would do. He did not till the field clean the way his neighbors tilled theirs. He planted directly into the cover crop residue, leaving a thick, uneven brown and green mat across the surface, roots from 3 different plant families still threading through the soil beneath it. It looked, to anyone driving past on County Road 9, like a field somebody had forgotten to take care of. Hollow Creek County recorded its driest June in 31 years that same season, the kind of drought that turns a farmer's radio into background noise he cannot stop listening to. Corn across the county curled its leaves inward by midday, a defense mechanism that reduces water loss, but also signals a crop under real stress. Daniel's neighbor to the east, a longtime friend named Ollie Braun, had a field of continuously tilled corn that still looked, from the road, dark green and tall and healthy, because irrigation and heavier nitrogen use can mask drought stress for weeks longer than most people realize. Daniel's 40 acres looked like the opposite, shorter, uneven. A visible tangle of dying cover crop residue still matted around the base of the corn, brown and untidy, exactly the picture a man expects when he pictures a field in trouble. That was the field Roland Pierce chose to inspect, on the 2nd week of July, with the contract's adjustment clause sitting unused in his folder for the first time in 3 years. Pierce walked the field with Daniel at 7 in the morning, before the heat set in, Claire and Wyatt following a few steps behind because Wyatt had asked to come, and Claire had not wanted to say no in front of him. Pierce crouched at the edge of the first row, pulled back a curl of dying rye residue, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he stood up, looked past Daniel, toward Ollie Braun's clean green corn on the far side of the fence line, and said the sentence that would follow Daniel Holt around Hollow Creek County for the rest of that year. "Daniel, I've walked a lot of fields. This isn't a harvest. This is a funeral, and you're standing in the middle of it. Wyatt has said, in an interview recorded later that fall, that his father did not raise his voice. He said Daniel simply asked Pierce one question: what was he actually measuring? Pierce said he was measuring what he could see and reduced the contracted delivery estimate for that field by 60% on the spot, a number that would cost the Holt farm nearly a full season's profit margin if it held. The Holt kitchen that week was not a peaceful place. Claire, who handled the farm's books, laid the numbers out plainly. A 60% reduction on that field, on top of a drought already suppressing yield everywhere else, put them close enough to the edge of their loan covenant that the bank would notice. Russell, Daniel's father, drove over twice that week, not to comfort his son, but to ask him, in the same patient, wounding tone he had used Daniel's whole life, whether he was finally ready to admit the cover crop had been a mistake. Daniel did not have an argument that satisfied either of them. He had a theory, built from agricultural extension bulletins he'd read at 2 in the morning for 2 years, about root systems and fungal networks and water retention that he could not yet point to and prove. He told Claire one night at the kitchen table after Wyatt had gone to bed that he could either till the field under right now, replant something Pierce could look at and approve of, or trust ground he could not see the inside of. Claire asked him a question he did not have a comfortable answer to. "If you're wrong, what does this cost us?" "Everything we've built the last 3 years, Daniel said. "But Claire, I think what's under that field right now is the only reason it's still alive at all." Russell did not let the argument go easily. On his second visit that week, standing in the driveway rather than coming inside, he reminded Daniel that the family had farmed that ground the same way since Eisenhower was president, and that a man could not eat a theory. Daniel let him finish. He has said since that the hardest part of that season was not the drought and was not Pierce. It was standing in his own driveway, wanting badly to defend a decision he could not yet prove, and choosing to say nothing rather than promise his father an outcome he did not actually control. Wyatt, listening from the porch steps, asked his father that same night whether Grandpa Russell was right. Daniel sat down next to him and told him the only honest answer he had. He did not know yet. He said a field does not care who is right. It only does what 2 years of roots and rain and rot have actually built into it, whether anyone is watching or not, and that sometimes the bravest thing a farmer can do is wait for ground to prove itself, instead of forcing it to look finished before it's ready. What Daniel could not show Pierce that morning, because it does not photograph well and does not show from a truck window, was happening several inches below the visible mess Pierce had walked through. 2 years of cover crop roots from 4 different plant families had built a dense underground architecture that continuously tilled soil simply does not have. Cereal rye roots run deep and fine, opening channels that water and air can move through long after the plant itself is gone. Clover, a legume, had spent 2 seasons pulling nitrogen from the air and fixing it into the soil through bacteria living in nodules on its roots. Radish, sometimes called a biodrill by agronomists, had punched foot-deep taproots into compacted layers left behind by decades of heavy equipment, opening pathways that the corn's own roots were now following straight down toward moisture the drought had not yet reached. And running through all of it, feeding on the sugars those living and decaying roots provided, was a network of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, a naturally occurring soil fungus that forms a symbiotic partnership with the vast majority of crop plants, extending thread-like structures called hyphae far beyond what any root can reach on its own, and trading water and phosphorus back to the plant in exchange for carbon. Research on cover-cropped dryland wheat systems has measured exactly this trade-off in action. Exchanges where fields with active fungal networks retained more soil water at planting, used that water more efficiently through the season, and finished with higher yield and higher grain protein than fallowed, conventionally managed ground, with the advantage growing specifically under drought stress rather than shrinking. Continuously tilled fields, by contrast, physically shear those fungal networks apart every season, forcing the fungus to rebuild itself from almost nothing each year, right when a crop needs it most. None of that was visible from County Road 9. All of it was underneath Daniel's boots the morning Pierce called his field a funeral. A week after Pierce's visit, at Claire's insistence, Daniel invited a county extension agronomist named Priscilla Hanby out to walk both fields, Daniel's and Ollie Braun's, side by side. Hanby had spent 15 years studying soil health across Hollow Creek County and had seen this exact mismatch before: a healthy-looking field running on borrowed water and a rough-looking field running on stored capacity nobody could see. She took soil samples from both fields that afternoon, cored 6 inches down, and held up the 2 soil cylinders side by side for Daniel and Wyatt to see without needing to explain much. Ollie's soil crumbled apart pale and dry almost as soon as it left the corer. Daniel's held together in a dark, moist, structured clump, riddled with visible root channels, and stayed damp for nearly an hour sitting in the July sun before it began to dry at all. "This isn't luck, Daniel," Hanby told him, turning the sample over in her hand. "This is exactly what 2 years of that mix was supposed to build. The question now is whether it built enough of it fast enough." Harvest arrived in late September, the drought finally broken by 2 weeks of rain that came almost too late to matter for most of the county. Ollie Braun's yield monitor, when his combine finally ran his fields, showed a season down significantly from his 5-year average. The drought stress from July never fully recovered from despite the late rain, the crop having burned through its shallow root reserve of water weeks earlier than it should have. Daniel ran his 40 acres on a gray Tuesday morning, Wyatt riding in the cab beside him, watching the yield monitor the way other boys his age watch a scoreboard. The number that came up on the screen, acre after acre, sat not below Ollie's average, and not merely close to Daniel's own historical yield on that same ground before the flood. It came in 22% above it, the deep, undisturbed root systems having reached soil moisture in August that Ollie's shallow-rooted corn never touched. When the grain reached the co-op elevator, the protein test on Daniel's load came back higher too, a difference buyers pay attention to because higher protein wheat and corn command better prices and better feed value, a direct, measurable reflection of a crop that had pulled nitrogen and water more efficiently through a season that punished plants that could not. Daniel stopped the combine at the end of the 11th row and sat with the engine idling for a moment before he said anything. Wyatt asked him what was wrong. Nothing was wrong. Daniel told him he just wanted to sit with the number for a minute before it became a story he told other people, because right then, it still belonged only to the two of them, in a cab that smelled like diesel and warm grain dust, with 2 years of driveway arguments finally settled by a screen instead of a debate. Roland Pierce drove out to the Holt farm again in October, this time without a folder, and stood at the edge of the same 40 acres, now bare stubble instead of ragged green residue. Daniel did not gloat, and has said since that he thought seriously about it and decided against it, mostly because Wyatt was standing next to him again, and he wanted his son to see how his father handled being right, more than he wanted the satisfaction of saying it. Pierce asked to see the yield data himself, and Daniel showed him, and for a long moment, Pierce said nothing at all, the same way he had said nothing crouched over that dying rye residue back in July. "I called it a funeral," Pierce finally said, "because it looked like every failed field I've ever walked. I wasn't wrong about what I saw, Daniel. I was wrong about what it meant." He reinstated the full contract that afternoon. The same clause he had used to cut it, now used to formally reverse the cut. The irregularity that would sit unexplained in the co-op's transaction records for years afterward. The following spring, Wyatt Holt, 15 now, asked his father if he could take the 18 acres behind the equipment shed, ground even his grandfather Russell had written off years earlier as too poor to bother with, and try the same approach himself, on his own small scale, as a school project the Extension Office had agreed to help him track properly. Russell, watching his grandson measure out cover crop seed on a scale in the equipment shed that Daniel had once used to measure out the same uncertain bet 2 years earlier, did not offer advice this time. He only watched, and asked Wyatt a single question before he left. "How long before you know if it worked?" "Longer than I'd like," Wyatt told him, "but that's kind of the point, isn't it?" At harvest, the following autumn, the 18 acres behind the equipment shed run their own yield numbers for the first time, Wyatt in the cab, instead of the passenger seat, Daniel walking the field on foot beside the combine, the way his own father never once did for him. The Miller's Creek 40 stretches gold and full behind them, 3 seasons removed from the flood that nearly took it, the ground beneath it holding water and root, and a kind of patience the county is only now starting to understand isn't weakness at all. Ollie Braun has planted his own first cover crop trial that spring, 4 acres along his fence line. Mostly, he told Daniel, because he wanted to see it for himself before he believed it. Russell has stopped bringing it up at Sunday dinner. He has started asking, instead, how the 18 acres are doing. If stories like this one matter to you, stay with Hollow Creek County. Subscribe for more stories from Hollow Creek, inspired by real agricultural principles. Because there is always another season, and always another field with more going on underneath it than anyone driving past could ever see.